Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to episode number 7 of the Arabic Kahwa podcast. Today I want to talk about one of the greatest stories in the history of Arabic poetry. It is the story of Antarah and Abla. Now Antarah, he is recognized as one of the greatest poets of Jahiliyyah, of the period before Islam, and also one of the greatest ever. His poem was one of the mu'allaqat. The mu'allaqat were those poems which were hung on the walls of the Kaaba because of how beautiful and eloquent they were. So the poem of Antara was one of these poems. And these are the poems the Arabs cherished the most. These are the poems they saw as the most beautiful words ever composed when it comes to poetry. And what is truly special about Antara is that he did not merely say these things like the other poets did. He not only, boasted about his greatness and his courage, but he also backed it up on the battlefield. Antara was not only a poet, but also one of the greatest warriors the Arabs had ever seen. Now, what motivated Antara to achieve all of these things? Antara was not chasing wealth. He was not interested in the booties of war. He was not interested in fame. That was not his main motivation. He was not motivated by wealth. He wanted one thing and one thing only. He wanted his cousin Abla. But Antara had a problem. Although she was his cousin, technically he was a servant and a slave to her family in her household. So how did this happen? The father of Antara, he had him with a slave woman named Zabiba. Antara's mother was a black slave woman. And it was the custom of the Arabs of that period that if a son is born to a slave, then he is born a slave. So Antara was born into slavery. And he was a black man. So because of the color of his skin and the fact that his mother was a slave, Antara was not given any status or any respect in his qabila, in his tribe. He was treated as a slave. And despite his courage, despite his eloquence, they still looked down upon him. So Antara, he really wanted one thing. He wanted to elevate himself through his courage in the battlefield until he attains the same status of his tribesmen. So Antara, through his valiant deeds and his courage, tries to attain the status that will let him marry Abla. He says, يا ابنة مالك كيف تسلي وأحد هواك من أحد الفطام. O daughter of Malik, how can I ever be consoled? For my love for you originated from the time of weaning. I have loved you ever since I was born. وكيف أروم منك القرب يوما وحول خباك آساد الأجام. But how can I ever hope to approach you while the lions of the forest guard your tent? Your tent is guarded by the fiercest warriors. وحق هواك لا دويت قلبي بغير الصبر يا بنت الكرام. By the truth of my love for you, my heart can never be cured, except by patience, O noble maid. إلى أن أرتقي درج المعالي بتعني الرمح أو درب الحسام, until I exalt myself to the heights of glory with the thrust of my spear and the blows of my sword. So this was the motivation of the great Antara. And his poetry is truly some of the most eloquent lines of poetry you will ever read. He addresses Abla and expresses his love for her in such a unique and profound fashion. For example, he says, وَلَقَدْ ذَكَرْتُكِ وَالرِّمَاحُ نَوَاهِلٌ مِنِّي وَبِيضُ الْهِنْدِ تَقْطُرُ مِنْ دَمِي. I remembered you, O Abla. When did he remember her? When the lances were drinking my blood, and the bright swords of Indian make, the Indian swords, were dripping with my blood. I remembered you in the battlefield, in the middle of the battle. فوددت تقبيل السيوف لأنها لمعت كبارق ثغرك المتبسم. And I wished to kiss the swords because they flashed brightly, and it reminded me of the flashing of your front teeth when you smile. So I wanted to kiss those swords. Subhanallah. And subhanallah, despite his bravery and his heroism in the battlefield, despite defending his tribe again and again, he is never recognized. He is looked down upon simply because of the color of his skin and the fact that his mother was a slave. But Antara is patient and magnanimous throughout this time. He is still remarkably loyal to his Qabila, to his tribe. He goes into battle and keeps defending them, defending their property, and he remains a loyal slave to them despite their ungratefulness. And Antara patiently waits his opportunity. Until one day, his tribe was under attack, and Antara was sitting away from the battle, and they could not defend themselves. They were losing. And the raiders, they took their property, and then they captured their women. They took Abla, they put her on a horse and started carrying her away. So the father of Antara, Shadad, comes to him and he says, "O Antar, Kur ya Antar, attack them, O Antar. They have taken everything. They have taken Abla." So Antara says, "Al-abdu la yuhsinu al-kar, innama yuhsinu al-hilaba was-sar." The slave is not good for fighting. He only knows how to milk and to tend to the flocks. And Shadad, he sees no way out but for the help of Antara. So finally he says, "Kur wa anta hur." Attack them, O Antara, and you are a free man. And then Antara gets up and he wears his armor and he descends upon them like the waves of the ocean. And he attacks them. He rescues Abla. And when the people of his tribe see his bravery and that Antara has come, they stop running and they come back, and the enemy is successfully driven out. And did Antara finally marry Abla? This is something that is disputed. Some scholars, they say he finally got to marry her, but a lot of them say he was never married to Abla. Now there's a reason for this. The Arabs, they had this crazy custom that if someone is deeply in love with a woman and he start singing poetry about her, like Antara did, they will never marry him to her. So that is why you find a lot of poets always talking about the pain of not being able to marry the woman they are in love with, because this was a custom of the Arabs to refuse them. So because of this, the tribe of Antara, they kept promising him. They would turn to him whenever they were in need of his help. When they were under attack, they would call upon the great warrior and praise him. And they would promise him. But when the battle is settled and when they're safe again, he becomes a slave again. And so this is a very painful story. Antara, he is underappreciated and, looked down upon throughout his life. But what is striking is his character and some of the values that we find that he holds. If you look at his poetry, you can see a lot of beautiful things in the character of Antara. He says, for example, هلا سألت الخيل يا ابنة مالك إن كنت جاهلة بما لم تعلمي. Why do you not ask the horseman, or daughter of Malik? He is again addressing Abla, and he says, why don't you ask the warriors, the horse riders, if you are ignorant concerning that which you do not know about my condition? Why don't you ask about me? Ask the warriors if you don't know. يخبرك من شهد الوقيعة أنني أغشى الوغى وأعف عند المغنم. The one who is present in the battle will inform you that verily I rush into the battle, but I abstain at the time of taking the booty. He is at the forefront when the battle is going on, but when it's time to take the booty, you find him at the back and not so interested. And he says, فَإِذَا شَرِبْتُ فَإِنَّنِي مُسْتَهْلِكٌ مَالِي وَعِرْضِي وَافِرٌ لَمْ يُكْلَمِ. When I am drunk, verily I am a squanderer of my wealth. I squander away my wealth, but my honor remains intact, even when I'm drunk. وَإِذَا سَحَوْتُ فَمَا أُقَصِّرُ عَنْ نَدَى وَكَمَا عَلِمْتِ شَمَائِلِي وَتَكَرُّمِي. But when I become sober, my generosity does not diminish. I squander the wealth in the same way I am when I am drunk, in generosity. So give honor where it is due for the qualities that you know I possess, O Abla. So this is the story of Antara, and it is truly amazing. If you want to read more, there is a very good translation of the story of Antara. I'll put a link to it in the description. This book, it is originally in Arabic, and it is 8 volumes, and the first 4 are translated into English by an Orientalist. But this book, its author is unknown. It is attributed to Al-Asma'i, but we can't be sure. And there are a lot of made-up stories in this, but nevertheless, it is a very enjoyable read. And even if, the story of Antara is mixed with a lot of myths and legends, there is no doubt that a part of those things that are said about him were undoubtedly true, because that is how he attained this amazing status and recognition throughout the Arabian Peninsula. And he was truly one of the greatest poets and warriors in the history of Arabic literature. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and bi'idhnillah, I will see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.